everybody. Welcome to the Vocus webinar, Writing Rules for PR. I'm Natalia Dickey, Director of Product Management at Vocus, and your moderator for today. During today's webinar with Ann Handley, we're going to learn how to write well in today's digital, short attention span environment, including why writing still matters and tips and tricks to become a better, more confident writer. Before I introduce Ann, we have a few quick housekeeping points. First, questions. There will be a moderated Q&A at the end of this webinar, so feel free to use that questions tab on your webinar panel to submit those anytime throughout the webinar today. If you'd like to download our slides from the webinar, you can click the Download Slides PDF link. That's in the box titled Want to Learn More at the bottom of your audience console. Also, if you're on Twitter today and want to tweet about the webinar, please use the Vocus Webinar hashtag. That's one word, Vocus Webinar. Or you can also use the tweet box at the top of this webinar console. Also note that the top Vocus webinar tweets are going to receive a Vocus prize pack in the mail. So we'll be revealing those winners on Twitter shortly after the webinar is concluded. So now I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker, Ann Handley. Ann Handley is the Chief Content Officer of Marketing Profs and author of Content Rules and Everybody Writes, which will be released in September. She also co-founded the interactive marketing news site ClickZ and has had her writing published in American Express Open Forum, Mashable, and the Huffington Post. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann. Ann, welcome.
Hello, Natalia, and hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks for that nice introduction, Natalia. As she mentioned, I'm the Chief Content Officer of Marketing Profs. I co-authored one of the best-selling books on content marketing, Content Rules, with my good friend Cece Chapman. And now I have a new book coming out in just a couple of weeks. I've been so used to saying this fall, but the reality is it really is just a couple of weeks, called Everybody Writes. So it's kind of this book that's coming out in a couple of weeks is kind of a six-headed new baby, so to speak, as odd as that would be to have a six-headed new baby. But nonetheless, it's a little bit what it feels like. So when I was thinking about preparing for this talk today, I had a little bit of a Sophie's choice, because I cover a lot in this book. I wrote this book because I couldn't find what I wanted, which was kind of a guide to writing that reframes writing as a skill and a discipline of PR and of content marketing. Also some easy and grammar usage rules, not something big and onerous like you might find framed for, literary types or journalists or some other kind of writer, but really framed for the content marketer, for the PR professional, as well as some things about story, some rules of publishing that are based primarily on my background as a journalist, and then some handy guideposts for things marketers write, like email and infographics and about us pages and home pages and all kinds of things like that, as well as some content tools to how we get this done. So I'm telling you all this just to give you some insight into the kind of anxiety that I had preparing for today in a way, because it's almost too much to cover. So here's what I decided to focus on today, really how to write better. In my mind, writing really is a fundamental of communicating, right? It's something that we all need to do, just like, as I said this morning in a chat on another site, just like a carpenter knows, any solid carpenter knows how to use a hammer or a skill saw that he may keep in his truck. I think all of us as PR professionals, as marketers, as communicators, really need to know how to write incredibly well. And I think we're all capable of it. Writing is not one of these things that is reserved only for a gifted few. I think all of us are capable of producing really good writing, which is why the subtitle of this book is Ridiculously Good Content, because I think we are all capable of ridiculously good content. Sometimes when people hear about writing, even outside of PR and marketing, but just writing in general, I think that this is what they think it is. They think it's kind of an art form. It's something that only a few of us who are particularly gifted can do well. But I don't think that's true. Here's actually how I think about writing. I think writing is inherently teachable, and that means it's inherently learnable. Is that a word? Learnable? I think it is. In other words, we all can learn how to be better writers just by focusing on some basics, some fundamentals that maybe we have to unlearn some things from school, but just some fundamentals that, that can help us be stronger writers. And also just focusing on some handy ways of accomplishing what we need to write. So in other words, thinking through what we want to write before we write it, think about our goals, what they are, and then think about assembling a kind of writing scaffolding, a kind of architecture to our writing so that it has real bones to it. Because writing, I think, is ultimately a habit. It's not an art. It's a habit that I think if we practice a little bit more often and with more intention, and if we reframe all the writing that we probably already do as bloggers, as communicators, as people who write articles, either on behalf of our own companies or on behalf of clients, for press releases, all of that stuff. I think if we reframe it all as something that contributes to a whole, we will become stronger writers if we do it with a little bit more intention. So writing is a habit, it's not an art. Think about it that way. I also think that a lot of times we equate good writing with grammar, right? But I told my family that I was writing a book on writing. They all thought, oh God, I'm terrible at grammar. And they said that to me, and that's not what it's about, right? I think grammar is important, but it's not just about grammar. I think it's a whole lot more than grammar, and it's a little bit more meaningful than grammar in a lot of ways. So some of you sharp-eyed grammarians on this webinar today might have noticed this small typo. What you're looking at right here, this is actually over the bar of a fish restaurant in Baltimore that I was in a couple of months ago. And it was sort of a funny reminder that you need copy editors for everything, you need proofreaders for everything. But to me, it's also more of a demonstration that, as I said, good writing does not equal grammar, right? It's not primarily about grammar. That isn't to say that grammar isn't important, it certainly is, but I also don't think that's what we should be thinking about first and foremost. I think that's part of the reason why many of us have a lot of anxiety about writing, because we think, we need to be 100% perfect with our grammar, with our spelling, with all those things that I think of as more secondary to the true expression of what we're trying to say. A key philosophy in Everybody Writes, and also just a key philosophy of me generally, is that there is no one way to write, just as there is no one way to raise a child or to roast a turkey, but I think that there are terrible ways to do all three. So just a quick aside, my daughter is in high school, and the past couple days she's been frantically trying to finish her summer work in anticipation of starting her senior year of high school. And she had a book to read over the summer, and she was sitting down to write a reflection on it. And so out of curiosity, I just asked her, so how do you approach that? And she's used to my weird questions like this because I tend to ask her a lot about the writing process, or I have been asking her a lot about her writing process. I've been asking everybody that, frankly, over the past couple of months while I was writing this book. So she said to me, well, I'm doing your typical 5-paragraph essay. And it was sort of funny to me because one of the things that I talk about in this book, and that I believe more in general, is that the idea of a 5-paragraph essay, which many of us probably did learn in high school, I know I learned it, maybe you did too, is not necessarily a great thing. I mean, I think in some ways it's useful because as children it allows us to focus on the most important points. A 5-paragraph essay, just to give you some context for this, is essentially an essay where it has literally 5 paragraphs. The first one is, your main point, the main key issue that you're trying to talk about in any sort of in the essay that you're writing, and then the second, third, the first, second, third point are then the next paragraphs down. So in other words, it's point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and then the 5th paragraph is your conclusion, right? So that's a very simple way to approach anything. The problem with it, though, I think, is that it implies that there is only one way to write, that there's a proper way to write and an improper way to write. Certainly my daughter has sort of internalized this idea. And it's interesting to me that I think as adults we sort of have this idea that lingers on, that there is one way to write, that there's a right way to approach something and a wrong way. But I'm here to tell you that is not the case. There are many ways to write. As I say here, there is no one way to write. There's no one way to raise a child. There's no one way to cook a Thanksgiving turkey. So just remember that as kind of a piece of a foundational concept of what we're going to be talking about today. So why does writing matter in PR? Or why does writing matter, more generally in content marketing in general? I think there are 3 reasons why it really does matter, why good writing matters as a foundation of any content that we're putting out there. There are 2 professional reasons and 1 human reason. So the professional reasons. There's a lot of content out there, right? And everybody here today knows this as well as I do. But here's some research to back it up. This is some research that Marketing Profs does every year with the Content Marketing Institute. We're now on our 5th year of putting this research together. And this is from our 2014 research, in which we asked B2B folks and then B2C, you can see parenthetically on the right, how many of you are creating content? 93% of marketers are creating content, right? There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of things being generated. At the same time, there's a lot of money flowing into content marketing, right? I mean, there's lots and lots of money that is being thrown toward creating blogs and infographics and webinars like this one and podcasts and videos and all the things. So 58% of B2B companies are upping their content budgets, they told us last fall for 2014. And I'm sure we'll see something very similar. We're just about to release the 2015, incredibly, numbers. And here's all that they're creating, right? I don't expect you to read this, but just take this in visually for a second. There's blogs and there's articles on websites and e-newsletters and social media and case studies and videos and articles on our own websites, articles on other websites and white papers and microsites, et cetera, right? On and on and on. For somebody like me who loves content as much as I do, I mean, this is awesome, right? It's awesome to see content being the cornerstone of our marketing of so much that we're doing. But at the same time, what's also inherent in this is a lot of anxiety, right? Because if everybody out there is creating content just like we are, look at all the wonderful stuff that we're creating, it's really hard to break through, right? It's really hard to be unique. So I wanted to give a little bit of a reality dose, right? That's inherent in the research that we did with the Content Marketing Institute. While there are companies who are killing it with content and social media, that are really killing it with telling their story more broadly, here's the reality. Only 44% of the marketers that we surveyed said that they have any sort of content strategy. So think about that for a second, right? There's lots of money flowing into content marketing. There's lots of people creating things, all the things that we just saw on that slide 2 slides ago. But yet 44% have any sort of strategy that are guiding all of those things that they're doing. And what's more, just 42% of marketers say that their content is effective. So I don't think that the symmetry of those 2 numbers is by mistake. I think without a strategy, certainly, your content marketing isn't going to accomplish what you need it to. And at the same time, it's not going to feel like it's working as hard as it could for you, right? So 42% of marketers say that their content is effective.